What would you do if you were told politely, of course, that your seat in first class was no longer available, only to watch someone else, someone very different from you, take it instead? Would you raise your voice, walk away, or would you stay seated? This is the true story of Donovan Ellis, a calm, powerful, black CEO who boarded Flight 2287 just like anyone else. Ticket scanned, seat assigned, itinerary set. But what unfolded at 36,000 feet wasn't just about travel. It was about power, about perception, about how quiet resistance can ripple louder than rage. A blanket, a lie, and a choice that would shake the entire airline industry from its polished lobby to its emergency exits. Who really belongs in Seat 2A? Why did a single act of stillness change everything? And how did one man's refusal to be erased become a lesson for the nation? Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in dignity, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal not just what happened, but why it matters. Now, let's begin. Donovan Ellis arrived at Holloway Skyport just after 4:30 m.m. His driver had dropped him quietly by the executive entrance, but he chose to walk the last 100 feet to the main terminal. It was something he did often when his thoughts felt heavy feet to floor, the rhythm of motion grounding him more than any conference call or stock update ever could. His Skylux Global flight to London was scheduled for 6:00 m.m. First class, Seat 2A. The booking had been locked into the system weeks ago. Still, when he approached the counter to scan his boarding pass, something in the attendant's expression flickered. "Mr. Ellis," the young man behind the kiosk began, eyes darting between the screen and Donovan's calm face. "It seems there's been a reassignment. You've been moved to Seat 6D, business class. There's an issue with 2A. Donovan raised an eyebrow, but his voice remained even. "What kind of issue?" The agent shifted uncomfortably. "It's a blanket request. The passenger in 2B has a medical condition. She needs space. Her service animal is sensitive to cologne and high movement, so she requested that the seat beside her remain vacant." Donovan paused, then nodded. He didn't argue. Not yet. The name on the manifest, Cheryl Beckman. He had seen that name before. Not at Skylux headquarters, not in the files, but in whispers. A long-time Platinum Plus flyer. The type of customer who donated to policy committees and reminded staff of her allergies, preferences, and network connections. He had hoped, perhaps naively, that the new internal protocols would filter out these moments. He had written them himself, or at least signed off on them. Silent dignity. The policy had said inclusion, but it was always easier on paper. Instead of boarding, Donovan walked to Gate 43's far corner and sat quietly in one of the metal seats. He opened his laptop, not to work, but to watch. He noticed her the moment she arrived. Cheryl Beckman. Hair platinum blonde. A sharp burgundy suit that seemed more for a stage than a red-eye flight. She swept through the gate with a small dog in a bubble backpack and a silk blanket tossed over her left arm. When she passed the counter, she smiled not warmly, but like a queen addressing the help. She did not look sick. But that wasn't the point. As Donovan watched her, he could feel a dull ache rise in his chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something else. That old feeling. The one that crept in when a taxi didn't stop. When a boardroom fell silent the moment he entered. When interns assumed he was the AV tech. Even now. At 42, net worth north of $900 million. CEO of the airline. He was still being asked to move. He looked down at his new seat assignment. 60. A seat in the center of a middle row. No windows, no dignity. His thumb hovered over the confirm boarding button on the app. He didn't press it. Instead, he opened a secure system on his second device, an encrypted portal only 3 executives in the company had access to. It controlled fleet diagnostics, executive reviews, and flight delay override commands. He stared at the cursor blinking. The interface was blank, waiting for his signal. He could reroute the entire boarding process, or pause it. He could suspend digital locks on the Skylux manifest for Protocol Echo, a code used only during legal emergencies or top-level compliance violations. Was this that? Was this what it was for, behind him? A child was humming. The sound broke through his internal fog. A boy, maybe 5, clutching a stuffed fox, was sketching a plane on the back of a napkin with a crayon. His mother beside him looked tired, but kind. Donovan smiled, then stood up. He walked back to the counter. "I'll board now," he said gently. The attendant nodded, avoiding eye contact. "Thank you for your patience, sir." Donovan passed through the priority lane. The boarding door hissed open, and there she was, Cheryl Beckman, already in 2B. Her blanket fluffed over 2A like a wall, her small dog yapping lightly at nothing, her eyes fixed on him the moment he stepped forward. She didn't speak, just lifted one brow, a look rehearsed, dismissive, as if to say, "You're not supposed to be here." Donovan took one step toward his assigned seat anyway. The flight attendant, Tessa Monroe, stepped in. "Sir, we do ask that you use the seat printed on your Pass 6D. Donovan pulled out the original confirmation. "Actually," he said softly, "this was my seat. 2A. Since booking 6 weeks ago. Confirmed through Executive Platinum." Tessa hesitated, looked back at Cheryl. Cheryl made a show of clutching her small dog tighter. "I filed a medical exemption." Donovan looked at her, and for the first time, spoke directly. "I'm sorry you're uncomfortable, but I believe it's time we address what this really is." Cheryl blinked. Tessa blinked. Silence for a moment. And then Donovan gently sat in 2A. He didn't force it. He didn't raise his voice. He simply claimed what was his. Donovan didn't raise his voice. He didn't call a manager. He didn't flash a badge or threaten to tweet. Instead, he simply leaned back into seat 2A with the calm of someone who had earned the space 1,000 times over. And maybe, if it weren't for the murmuring behind him or the sharp inhale from Cheryl Beckman in 2B, it might have ended there. But power never releases its grip quietly. Cheryl leaned toward the aisle, summoning Tessa Monroe again with a snap of her fingers. "Excuse me, I paid for solitude. I can't possibly sit like this. I already filed a medical exemption. If I have a reaction..." Tessa crouched beside her, whispering something meant to soothe. Donovan heard it anyway. "Yes, Ms. Beckman, I understand. We did submit your request. But this passenger does have a confirmed Executive Platinum assignment." Cheryl's voice sharpened. "Is there no manager, no supervisor? This is not what I agreed to. He's sitting directly next to me. Directly." The emphasis hung in the air longer than necessary. Donovan said nothing, but in his mind, memories surfaced uninvited. The day he was mistaken for a delivery man at his own headquarters. The security guard who had asked for 2 forms of ID just to let him onto a stage he was scheduled to keynote. The woman who clutched her purse tighter on an elevator, then smiled thinly when he noticed. It was always there. This disbelief that he belonged. Tessa stood, clearly unsure what to do. "Let me speak with the captain," she said quickly. Donovan gave her a brief nod as she moved down the aisle. He wasn't angry with her. Not yet, but his fingers twitched lightly over the edge of the seat. He had stayed calm for years, decades, but the weight of all the silent compromises was starting to show in the pressure behind his eyes. From the window, dawn was just starting to peel back the darkness over the tarmac. Passengers continued to board. Micah Callan, the little boy with the crayon from earlier, walked down with his mom, eyes wide when he noticed Donovan in first class. He waved. Donovan returned it softly, and that single, wordless exchange eased something in his chest. But then came the second blow. A man in a blazer 3 sizes too tight, badge clipped proudly to his breast pocket, arrived with purposeful strides. "Sir," he began, not unkindly, but firmly, "we've been asked to confirm your seating assignment." There's been some confusion. Donovan handed him the original email. Seat 2A, confirmed by Skylux's own executive desk. The man studied it, scratched his head. "Sir, I understand. But the other passenger filed a special medical accommodation. It's delicate." "I see," Donovan replied, voice still low. "So the request of one overrides the reservation of another." "No, it's not like that," the agent stammered. "It's just, well, we try to make everyone comfortable." Donovan nodded. "Interesting. And who ensures my comfort?" There was no answer. A pause stretched between them, tight and uncomfortable. "Sir," the agent finally offered, "we'd be happy to provide you with a complimentary voucher for another flight or move you to our lounge while we prepare the next available first-class seat." "I'm already in one," Donovan said. "I'm not asking for extra. I'm just asking to stay." Cheryl's scoff was audible now. "This is ridiculous. I have a certified letter from my physician. This is harassment." Tessa had returned. "Captain is reviewing the situation. He says we may have to delay takeoff if this isn't resolved." Passengers behind them began shifting, whispering. One even pulled out her phone. Donovan caught the lens pointing toward him briefly before the woman turned it downward. He leaned back, closed his eyes. Inside, a storm was forming, not of rage, but of resolve. He thought of his grandmother, who used to tell him stories of walking 5 miles barefoot to clean houses where she wasn't allowed to drink from the same glassware. Who told him, over and over, "Keep your head high. They cannot make you less." He thought of his father, who was denied a loan 3 times, despite perfect credit, and who still opened a small auto shop with cash from 3 cousins and a prayer. He thought of his daughter, Amara, who had asked him just last month if people would stop treating her differently once she became a pilot like him. And now, here he was, the owner of this plane, the architect of the route, the man who built Skylux into a luxury carrier with a dignity-first policy woven into every marketing campaign, being asked to move for a blanket. Donovan opened his eyes and turned slowly toward Cheryl. "What exactly is it that makes you uncomfortable?" he asked. "Is it my cologne? My presence? Or something else you haven't quite named?" Cheryl flushed, her eyes narrowing. "This is a safety matter, nothing more." He held her gaze. "No, this is something more." Tessa shifted awkwardly. The tension had become a thick, unbreathable fog. But then, another voice joined. Micah's mother. Quiet but clear. "Excuse me, I don't mean to intrude, but I saw what happened. He was here before you. He didn't do anything wrong." Cheryl turned sharply. "Are you a doctor? Do you know my condition?" "I'm a mother," the woman replied. "And my son's been watching." If you make someone feel small for being where they belong, that's a lesson he'll carry a long time. The silence that followed was different, Less charged, more unsettled. Donovan exhaled, then slowly stood not to surrender, but to signal. He took out his phone and opened Protocol Echo. The captain's tablet pinged 2 rows ahead. Tessa's walkie buzzed. The gate kiosk system froze. A 5-minute override. A code only 3 people in the airline could execute. Tessa blinked as her screen turned blue. The captain turned back to check who sent it. And Cheryl's dog barked again. Donovan didn't smile. He didn't need to, because sometimes justice wasn't loud. Sometimes it was just the sound of silence, arriving exactly when you needed it most. For a moment, the entire aircraft paused. No flight announcements, no boarding chimes, just the soft hum of the engines beneath them and the echo of Protocol Echo hanging in the air. Tessa Monroe's headset crackled once, then went quiet. She tapped her tablet again. Still frozen, she looked at Donovan Ellis with widened eyes, finally realizing what most hadn't yet. This wasn't just a passenger. He had written the override. Meanwhile, the captain emerged from the cockpit, Captain Ellis Grant, a man nearing retirement, sharp-eyed and respected in the pilot circles. He walked down the first-class aisle with the gravity of someone who had flown through storms and politics alike. "Mr. Ellis," he said, voice low and even. "Do you want to speak in private?" Donovan rose. "No, Captain. I believe we've had enough silence." The captain gave a slow nod, then turned to Cheryl Beckman. "I've received word that a protocol lockdown has been initiated at the executive level," he said. "Do you understand what that means?" "Ms. Beckman Cheryl blinked. "It means he's trying to embarrass me." "No, ma'am. It means flight operations are suspended for this aircraft until the situation is reviewed at the highest level of our chain of command." A murmur ran through the cabin. Phones were now recording openly. Donovan stayed still. He wasn't grandstanding. He wasn't even angry anymore. What he was feeling now was the heavy humming vibration of truth rising to the surface. "Passengers," the captain announced more broadly, "we apologize for the delay. We'll be pausing all boarding procedures for the next several minutes. If you are already seated, please remain so. Our ground team will be addressing this shortly." Tessa stepped aside to let him pass, but her eyes flicked between Donovan and Cheryl like she was watching a storm drift over open water, uncertain which way it would bend. Back in seat 2A, Donovan sat down again, this time slower. He felt the weight of what he'd just done. It wasn't just about him anymore. His thoughts returned to Amara, his daughter. She was 12. Smart, unapologetic, a lover of flight simulators and building drone wings out of salvaged laptop parts. A week ago, she had cried after a teacher commented on her aggressive posture during a science presentation, all because she corrected someone politely. He had told her to hold her ground. Now he had to do the same. "Do you want me to move?" he asked quietly, almost without emotion. It wasn't a question to the flight staff. It was to Cheryl. Her jaw tightened. "I want to be safe." Donovan's voice softened. "And what about my safety, or dignity, or the quiet right to sit without being questioned? You think discomfort belongs only to you." "I don't feel comfortable answering that," she replied stiffly. "That's the difference," he said. "I didn't have a choice. You asked, and I was expected to yield." Tessa returned. She'd regained access to her terminal. "Mr. Ellis," she said carefully, "Ground Operations Control is on the line. They'd like to speak to you." He nodded, taking the offered headset. "This is Donovan." The voice on the other end was crisp, corporate. "Sir, We see the lockdown. Would you like us to initiate a full incident report? Not yet, he said. Just hold boarding for now. Understood. Your authority is confirmed. Will you need to speak with risk management? Donovan's voice didn't waver. No. But if we delay another 15 minutes, send them my notes. He handed the headset back and looked out the window again. The sun had fully broken the horizon now, bleeding orange across the concrete and reflecting in the cold sheen of the wing. Cheryl pulled her blanket tighter around her lap. Donovan turned to her one last time. Ms. Beckman, you have made it clear that my presence makes you uncomfortable. I want to be equally clear. I am not moving. Her mouth opened slightly, then shut again. Across the aisle, a man in 2C finally spoke up. It's about time someone said something. Others nodded, quietly, subtly, but they did. Not all change begins with applause. Sometimes it begins with a refusal. Tessa looked down at her screen and smiled faintly. Boarding has resumed. Sir? Donovan didn't smile back. He simply sat there, present and unyielding. But inside, he felt something shifting. He wasn't done. This wasn't just about one flight. This was about what happened when you brought quiet power into a system that didn't expect it. About what changed when people stopped giving way. Not with fury, but with stillness. He glanced at Cheryl, now visibly flustered and suddenly aware of the social gravity pressing in from all sides. And for the first time since stepping onto that plane, Donovan felt completely grounded, not by the engines, but by truth. Donovan didn't move when the captain returned. He sat still, legs crossed, hands resting lightly over his lap, the way his mentor taught him years ago in the boardroom, own your space without ever needing to prove you belong in it. Captain Ellis Grant walked back down the aisle. He wasn't holding a clipboard or issuing orders. This time, he stopped right beside seat 2 and lowered his voice. Mr. Ellis, he said, would you be willing to come to the cockpit with me? Passengers nearby shifted in their seats. Some raised their phones again. Others watched without blinking. Donovan didn't ask why. He simply rose, gave a slight nod to the older man, and followed. Inside the cockpit, the door closed behind them. It smelled like plastic and metal. The panels hummed with quiet life. Co-pilot Torres offered a nod before stepping out, giving them privacy. The captain sat in the jump seat. His face was weathered, with soft creases around his mouth that hinted at years of commanding steelbirds through turbulent skies. Why now, he asked without preamble. Donovan looked through the cockpit windshield. The tarmac stretched endlessly, the distant terminal glowing under morning light. I've been in this seat before, he said. Not two-way. I mean, this moment told to move. Told my presence was a disruption. But this time, my daughter was watching. The captain leaned back, arms crossed. You know they're going to spin this. Flight disruption, power play, publicity stunt. I didn't call the cameras. Donovan replied calmly. She did. He meant Cheryl. She chose discomfort and cloaked it in policy. That's always the defense. I didn't feel safe. Not because of what I did, but because of who I am. The captain was silent for a moment, then spoke. You've grounded an entire section of the airline's hierarchy. You realize this won't stay inside the plane. I'm counting on that. The captain considered him, not unkindly. There's a storm system rolling in west of here. If we don't leave in the next 30 minutes, we miss our departure window. Donovan tilted his head. Then you better not waste time. Captain Grant chuckled once, just once. A dry breath of air. You remind me of my brother. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, people listen. He stood, opened the cockpit door, and gestured for Donovan to follow. "Come on. Let's show them that staying seated is sometimes the strongest thing a man can do." Back in 2A, Donovan resumed his seat. Across the aisle, Cheryl was no longer draped in certainty. Her eyes darted to her phone, then to the other passengers who now avoided meeting her gaze. Donovan could feel the shift. The power dynamic had turned, not through aggression, but through refusal. The final group of passengers boarded in relative silence. An elderly woman with silver hair and tired hands touched Donovan's shoulder lightly as she passed. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. Tessa returned with a fresh cup of black coffee and a folded note. "It's from the gate supervisor," she said. "They're watching the footage already." Donovan opened the note. It read, "Thank you for holding the line. You're not the first, but you were seen. J. Price." He folded it and tucked it into the inner pocket of his blazer. The aircraft pulled back from the gate. Over the intercom, Captain Grant addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are cleared for departure. Weather reports show mild turbulence, but we'll do our best to keep the ride smooth." Donovan didn't close his eyes during takeoff. He watched the ground fall away, slow and steady. He thought about his mother, about how she once told him, "Some seats cost more than a ticket. Some you have to fight for without ever raising your voice." When the plane leveled out, Tessa returned. Kneeling beside his seat for a moment, "Mr. Ellis, I have to ask, why didn't you report her immediately? You had every reason." Donovan met her gaze. "Because the system is designed to protect her anyway. If I fight the way they expect me to, I lose. But if I sit still long enough, they'll have to explain why she was afraid of stillness." Tessa blinked. She hadn't expected that answer. "It's a long flight," she said. "Standing. If you need anything, I'll ask." He finished. An hour into the flight, the Wi-Fi stabilized and phones began buzzing. News alerts, social media videos, threads forming around the quiet black man in seat 2A and the woman who tried to move him. Donovan watched it unfold quietly. A trending tag emerged. Seat 2A. It wasn't rage that spread. It was curiosity, respect, questions. Someone posted, "Why did she think her blanket was more important than his presence?" Another added, "He grounded the plane by refusing to move. That's the kind of power they don't know how to silence." Donovan closed his laptop. He looked outside again. Somewhere down there. Amara was at school, probably hearing whispers, maybe even seeing him pop up on a friend's screen. He imagined her eyes widening, her shoulders straightening. She would know now her father didn't fold. He didn't lecture. He just stayed seated. At 35,000 feet, that meant everything. The hum of the engine grew louder as tension brewed quietly beneath the surface, like a storm waiting for the right moment to break. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, casting a soft amber hue across rows of still passengers, many of whom had seen the now viral clip of Donovan sitting silently in seat 2A. Tessa Monroe made her way down the aisle once again, but this time she moved differently, more alert, more aware of the unspoken weight in the air. The other flight attendants adjusted their tones too, as though someone had passed around a silent memo: you are being watched, not just by passengers, but by the world. Cheryl Beckman, the woman whose blanket had sparked it all, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was texting furiously now, lips drawn tight. Her polished nails tapped the screen like it owed her an explanation. Every so often, she looked up at Donovan, only to find his eyes somewhere else, never on her. Donovan, for his part, wasn't basking in the attention. He wasn't even responding to the dozens of messages hitting his phone every few minutes. Instead, he sat with one hand loosely cradling a small velvet pouch. Inside, it was a lapel pin from his late father, a symbol of Ellis Engineering's founding. His thoughts weren't on the virality. They were on legacy. He was remembering the night his father came home with blood on his knuckles, face swollen, but eyes burning with resolve. A white contractor had refused to pay his crew for 2 weeks of labor. Donovan was 9 at the time, and he had never forgotten what his father told him that night. "I didn't fight to hurt him, son. I fought to be remembered." Donovan hadn't raised a fist today, but he'd made sure they would remember. From row 12, a young woman stood up and quietly approached. She wore a crisp blazer over jeans and had the aura of someone used to speaking on camera. She stopped at Donovan's row and leaned in. "I'm Camille, producer with Atlantic Morning News," she said, keeping her voice low. "When we land, I'd like 5 minutes if you're open to it. Off the record if needed." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Why do you want to talk?" Camille seemed caught off guard. Then she smiled slightly. "Because silence like yours makes more noise than outrage ever could." He nodded once. That was enough. She returned to her seat. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Ellis Grant received a direct message through the secure Airline system. The message was brief, encrypted, and stamped with an executive clearance code. "Captain Grant, stand by. Legal is assessing potential exposure. Do not land at LAX until cleared to proceed. Secure all internal communications." He rubbed his temples. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one forming inside the company. As the jet began its descent toward California airspace, turbulence finally struck. Not violent, but enough to jolt a few cups and test some nerves. Donovan's hand instinctively reached for the armrest. Across the aisle, Cheryl clutched hers like it was life itself. "Funny," he thought. "You feared me sitting beside you, but you don't mind us sharing the same gravity when the wind shakes us both." He breathed in, slow and deep. In his mind, he was already preparing for what came next. There would be statements, deflections, apologies wrapped in strategic language, and most dangerous of all, there would be silence from those who could have spoken but didn't. The aircraft captain's voice returned over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to hold at 14,000 feet due to air traffic congestion at LAX. We appreciate your patience." Translation: the airline wasn't ready for what awaited on the ground. A child in the back began to cry. Someone clicked their tongue in annoyance. Another passenger offered a soft lullaby, the human chorus of an airborne pause. Then came another message, this time straight to Donovan's personal inbox. From Kara Shepard, Chairwoman, Ellis Trust Subject. "We saw you, Donovan. We watched it unfold. Stay grounded. Everything that matters starts with the way you sat. We'll handle the rest." He stared at the screen for a few moments, then turned it off. There was nothing else to say right now. Just a storm to ride through, and a seat to hold. Tessa returned again, this time with a genuine smile. "I thought you might like tea," she offered. He accepted it, nodding once. "Your crew's done well," he said. Finally, Tessa lowered her voice. "I didn't say anything earlier. I wanted to, but I was afraid. Afraid of what he asked. That if I chose the wrong side, I'd lose my job." Donovan looked at her. The lines around her eyes were soft, vulnerable. She couldn't have been older than 30. "You didn't need to choose a side," he said gently. You just needed to see clearly. That's enough for most people. For the rest, action follows. She stood for a moment longer, then moved on. The plane remained in holding pattern another 20 minutes. During that time, tweets continued. Hashtags multiplied. Passenger footage was analyzed frame by frame, like it was courtroom evidence. By the time they received clearance to land, 3 flight attendants had been contacted directly by internal HR. A legal rep had boarded a separate company jet in San Diego, scheduled to intercept them at the arrival gate, and Cheryl. She was on the phone with someone, whispering now. I didn't mean it like that. It wasn't about him. It was about space. You know how people take things the wrong way. Her voice trailed off. Donovan didn't look her way. He simply adjusted the cuff of his tailored jacket, placed the velvet pouch back into his coat pocket, and whispered softly to himself, "They'll remember," just like he said they would. The cabin began to shift as the landing gear extended, and with it came a pressure that was no longer just physical, but emotional, simmering beneath every exchanged glance. The quiet became heavier, not the silence of rest, but the quiet of anticipation, the kind that wrapped itself around every breath, every blink, every thought passengers tried to suppress. Donovan remained still, his hands folded over his lap, his shoulders relaxed in a way that was deliberate. He'd learned over years in boardrooms that there was a kind of strength in composure. Let others fidget, let them panic. He would not. Outside the window, Los Angeles blinked back at him in lights. The city where everything could change in a moment, and often did. The intercom chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for final descent. Please return to your seats and ensure all tray tables are stowed." It wasn't the voice of Captain Ellis Grant this time. Instead, it was the co-pilot, her tone slightly hesitant, as if she too understood that this flight would be remembered far beyond its destination. In the cabin, devices came out. Passengers pretended to review landing instructions, but were really watching their social feeds light up. Donovan's name had made it into trending status. The video had been shared by 3 major news outlets. There was already a clip with the caption, "When silence speaks louder than rage." A small boy 2 rows up pointed at Donovan and whispered to his father, "Is that the man who sat still when they tried to move him?" The father nodded solemnly, his hand tightening protectively around the boy's. As the wheels met the runway with a soft screech, passengers exhaled together. But it wasn't relief. It was anticipation. What would happen now? The jet coasted toward its gate. The seatbelt sign remained lit longer than usual. Flight attendants exchanged glances, subtle nods passing between them. Even Cheryl Beckman, who had not spoken a full sentence since the incident, was gripping the handle of her designer bag like a lifeline. Tessa Monroe walked down the aisle once again, but this time she stopped beside Donovan. "There's a message for you," she said softly. "From corporate. They said it was urgent." Donovan didn't reach for his phone. Instead, he looked up at her. "And you, are you okay?" The question caught her off guard. She swallowed hard before nodding. "I think I'm learning how to be." "Then that's enough for today," he said. The doors remained closed even as the jet reached the gate. A uniformed official stepped aboard, flanked by 2 airline executives in suits with clipped badges and tight expressions. Passengers watched, their phones angled discreetly, some not so discreetly. The lead executive approached Donovan and extended a hand. "Mr. Ellis, I'm Mark Dunning, Regional Director of Operations for Skylinks Airlines. May I speak with you privately?" Donovan stood slowly. He was not tall in the way that intimidated. He was tall in the way that demanded awareness. I believe you already have, Donovan replied calmly. Mark hesitated. If we could step into the jetway. No, Donovan said, his tone steady. We'll speak here. I've nothing to hide. Cameras clicked. A few gasps echoed softly. Mark adjusted his tie. We understand there's been a misunderstanding. Donovan's eyes narrowed. Just slightly. A misunderstanding, he repeated. Yes. The incident with the seating assignment, and you mean the part where your airline told me my seat was unavailable because a white passenger's blanket touched it, or the part where no one corrected it until my board intervened from 35,000 feet in the air. Mark flushed. Tessa remained close, not interfering, just present. I want a full report made public, Donovan said. Not a redacted version, not a letter of apology addressed, Dear guest. I want accountability and transparency. And if we don't comply, Donovan's smile didn't reach his eyes. You'll have to explain why a major shareholder is freezing all non-domestic expansion capital and requesting a federal audit on discriminatory service patterns over the past 5 fiscal years. Gas again, someone murmured. He's not just a passenger. He's a board member. More phones went up. Mark's mouth opened, then shut. Donovan turned to Tessa. You were the only one on this flight who looked me in the eye when you spoke. That's rare. She blinked. I didn't know what to do. You did enough, he replied. You stayed human. Then he stepped forward, brushing past the airline officials, past Cheryl, who couldn't quite meet his gaze, and walked slowly down the aisle. Passengers parted for him like he was something sacred or something dangerous. Maybe both. When he reached the exit, Camille Drew was waiting. She didn't shove a mic in his face. She simply nodded and walked beside him through the jet bridge. Outside, camera crews were already positioned. Lights, microphones, journalists, protesters, supporters, a wave of noise. He paused just inside the glass terminal doors and took a breath. Behind him, the cabin of Flight 728 remained hushed. Ahead of him, the world watched. Each step through the terminal was a reminder that the world was watching, not just for scandal, but for someone to say what needed to be said and stay standing after saying it. Donovan's gait was slow, deliberate, not because he was tired, but because he understood momentum, how it could shift not just a man's direction, but the focus of a nation's gaze. Reporters surged forward the moment he cleared the automatic doors, but none broke through the silent wall created by his presence. A few camera lenses zoomed in to capture every subtle muscle twitch, every quiet decision in his eyes. But Donovan did not stop. Tessa Monroe followed just behind, her Skylynx badge still clipped to her blouse. She should have walked away, clocked out, gone home to her studio apartment in Long Beach. But something made her stay. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was hope. Hope that if she stayed close to the man at the eye of the storm, she might learn how to stand taller herself. Outside, the protest signs had started appearing. Most were hand-painted, some rushed, some carefully lettered. Dignity in the sky. We fly with Ellis. No seat for hate. One reads simply, why wasn't he enough? Donovan paused briefly at the sidewalk where a black town car waited. The driver opened the door, but Donovan didn't get in. Instead, he turned to Camille Drew, who was weaving her way through the throng with her press credentials raised. He gave her a small nod. Camille, Mr. Ellis, she replied. Are you willing to comment now? A pause. The air seemed to tighten. I'm not here to perform outrage, Donovan said. That's already been done enough today. I'm here to ask the people watching to look at what happened not to me, but to a system that saw nothing wrong with what happened to me until it went viral. "Do you believe it was racially motivated?" she asked. He held her gaze. "I believe it was culturally designed, and it's time we redesign the culture." Tessa's breath caught at that, because it wasn't just a soundbite. It was a blueprint. Later, inside the town car, Donovan finally checked his phone. There were over 140 missed calls and messages. His legal counsel, his COO, his mother, and one from his college mentor that simply read, "You were raised for this moment." He stared at the message a long time. Raised for it. Born into a country where chairs could be pulled from beneath you with a smile. Raised in a home where his father taught him to never let anger be the loudest part of him. Taught that strength wasn't just about standing up, but about knowing when to sit still and let the world catch up. He scrolled further. A message from the Skylink's CEO. "We would like to invite you to meet with our senior team to review inclusivity and anti-bias training. You have our full support and apology." Donovan responded with a single-word schedule. Then he closed his eyes. Memories returned uninvited. A school field trip where he'd been asked to sit at the back of the bus not by the school, but by a parent chaperone. A promotion in his early 30s that was rescinded after a client asked for someone more familiar with the firm's culture. That word again. Culture. He opened his eyes to the city lights. This time, they didn't blink. They blazed. At his penthouse. The doorman nodded silently. No questions, no whispers, just presence. Inside. Donovan stood before the window and looked down at the grid of LA traffic. One red tail light after another. Everyone going somewhere. Everyone missing something. His phone buzzed again. "Tessa." He picked up. "I'm sorry to call," she said quickly. I wanted to say thank you for how you spoke, for staying calm when—" "You were watching?" he asked. "I stayed in the airport lounge," she admitted, "until I knew you'd left safely." Donovan was silent. "I'm resigning," she added. "I can't go back there. Not after this." "Don't," he said quietly. "But don't run. Stay. Change it from the inside if you can. Not everyone gets that chance." There was a long silence. "Do you believe people can change?" she finally asked. "I believe people can choose," he replied. And with that, he hung up gently. In the stillness of the room, Donovan poured a glass of water and sat down. His laptop screen flickered to life. The homepage of Skylinks' shareholder portal opened. He began drafting a formal motion, one that would mandate racial bias training, redefine employee accountability, and include anonymous passenger reporting tools across every regional hub. But more than that, he began sketching something deeper. A foundation, one built not on press releases or reactive policies, but on personal dignity. One that would train frontline workers how to recognize bias, not just in others, but in themselves. One that would teach courage. Because legacy wasn't always about buildings with your name on them. Sometimes, legacy was the seat you refused to surrender. Behind every closed door in that corporate building was a silence deeper than policy. And Donovan knew that confronting silence was often the loudest thing a man could do. He entered the Skylinks headquarters on Monday morning, not as a guest, not as a customer, but as a shareholder. His tailored navy suit matched the gravity of the occasion. His steps were soft, yet precise, like someone entering a courtroom or a church. Camille Drew had offered to accompany him, to document the meeting and report from the inside. But Donovan declined. This was not a spectacle. This was a reckoning, and not all reckonings needed witnesses. The receptionist looked up as he approached. and her breath caught briefly before she composed herself. A badge was prepared. Temporary. Visitor. Donovan accepted it without reaction and clipped it to his lapel. The elevator ride was long. 12 floors. Silence. The chrome panels reflected the strength in his posture, the calm in his gaze. Upstairs, a boardroom waited. Frosted glass. Glossed walnut. A single pot of coffee sat steaming in the corner, and a folder, thick with printouts, rested near the head of the table. 3 executives entered first, Mark Dunning among them. He looked thinner than before, less polished. He did not offer a hand. Neither did Donovan. Then came a woman Donovan had not seen before, Alexis Tran, the new vice president of compliance. She greeted him with a formal nod, no apology, but no avoidance either. She seemed the only one who looked him in the eye without flinching. "Mr. Ellis," she said, "thank you for coming. Shall we begin?" They did. Donovan listened through 2 hours of prepared statements, internal policy presentations, and half-hearted acknowledgments. But the moment came when he asked for the report. "What report?" Mark asked, too quickly. "The one written by your internal audit team. I'm told it was concluded last December. It concerns bias complaints on domestic flights, especially in premium classes." Mark hesitated. Alexis turned to him, surprised. "That report was shelved," she said slowly. "It was marked non-actionable." Donovan nodded, "which makes it even more valuable to this conversation." He said, "With a quick request, an assistant was dispatched." Minutes later, the report was produced, stapled, black and white, no graphics, no fanfare, just facts. Donovan read the first page aloud. In the past 18 months, Skylinks received 374 documented complaints from Black and Hispanic passengers regarding unequal treatment by flight attendants or gate agents. Of these, only 4 resulted in formal disciplinary action. No systemic analysis was conducted, no public acknowledgement made. He turned to page 2. Of 92 first-class boarding incidents reviewed, 64 involved reassignments due to passenger discomfort. In 49 of those, the reseated passenger was non-white. A hush fell over the room, and not the respectful kind, the exposed kind. Donovan looked up. This was not a one-time mistake. He said quietly, "This was your culture." Alexis took the report gently and nodded. "I was not aware of the suppression," she said, "and I intend to investigate it fully." Mark shifted in his seat. "Mr. Ellis, we agree the report should have been addressed." But Donovan raised a hand. "No more statements. Mark, just decisions. I've already filed a shareholder motion, and I expect full cooperation." Silence again. Donovan stood. "The dignity of your brand will never be louder than the dignity of the people who sit in your seats. Start acting like you know that." Then he left. Outside, the air was thick with sun and smog, but Donovan breathed easily. At home, he met with his executive assistant, Maya Rhodes. She brought updates from their foundation. "We've received over 40,000 emails," she said. "Educators, flight crew, passengers, some just saying thank you, some asking what comes next." Donovan smiled faintly. "We build what didn't exist," he said. "We teach what was never taught." That evening, he opened a notebook. Not a laptop, not a spreadsheet, just paper and ink. He wrote down phrases. Training that humanizes accountability isn't optional. Bias doesn't need intention to cause harm. He paused, then wrote change. Won't come from apology. It will come from habit. There was a knock. He opened the door to find Tessa Monroe. She stood holding a small box. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "I'm here to return something. My badge, my name tag, my uniform. I kept them, even after I resigned. But I don't want to forget what they taught me." Donovan looked at the box, then back at her. "I want to work with you," she said, "to help create whatever you're building." He stepped aside. Let her in. They talked for hours about language, power, silence, and what comes after public humiliation. And when she left, Donovan sat again with his notebook. He added 2 words to the bottom of the page: legacy partners. Truth often arrived quietly, like a child in row 2B, unnoticed until the moment it changed everything. That day, Donovan Ellis boarded a flight not as an executive or activist, but as a man trying to reclaim peace. It had been weeks since the confrontation, and the public storm still hadn't settled. But Donovan needed silence, even if only for a few hours above the clouds. The gate agent greeted him politely. Her eyes flickered with recognition, but no resistance. He stepped onto the aircraft, the hum of engines filling the aisle. He walked slowly, glancing at the seats, reading the faces, sensing the mood. Seat 2A was his, a window seat, always his preference. He reached for his carry-on, but froze. In 2B, the seat beside him, sat a child, alone, no parent in sight. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8, brown skin, big eyes, nervous hands clutching a book too tightly. Donovan gently lowered his bag and sat. "Hey there," he said softly. The boy looked up. His lips moved, but no words came. Donovan smiled. "You heading somewhere fun?" The boy shook his head. "I'm going home," he whispered finally. "My aunt is waiting. Sounds like she's lucky to have you," Donovan said. The boy nodded, but stayed silent. He kept looking out the window, blinking too fast. A few minutes later, a flight attendant passed by. Donovan caught her attention. "Excuse me, this boy, he's flying alone." The woman smiled sadly. "Yes, sir. His name's Malcolm. He's with our unaccompanied minor program. Lost his mom last year. Visits his aunt in D.C. every few months." Donovan's chest tightened. "Thanks," he said quietly. The woman leaned down. "You seem kind. If he gets overwhelmed, just press your call button." He nodded. As the plane taxied and lifted into the sky, Donovan stole glances at Malcolm. The boy clutched his seatbelt with white-knuckled fear. His lips trembled, but he didn't cry. Not once. "First time flying?" Donovan asked after the seatbelt sign turned off. Malcolm shook his head. "Third," he said, "but this time feels different," he added after a pause. Donovan waited. "I had a dream last night," Malcolm whispered. "My mom was holding my hand. She let go. Then I woke up." Donovan looked at him, steady and calm. Dreams don't always mean someone's leaving. Sometimes they mean someone's watching. Malcolm looked up. "Do you dream about your mom?" "My mom's still alive," Donovan replied gently. "But I dream about others I've lost. And I think they're still with me somehow. In what I choose, in what I change." Malcolm nodded slowly. Then, from his backpack, he pulled out a paper folder. "I brought this to show my aunt," he said. "Want to see?" Donovan smiled. "Sure." Inside were drawings, crayon and pencil. One was of a man standing in front of a plane. A crowd of people surrounded him. He held up a sign. Words scribbled in shaky handwriting said, "You matter. Always." Donovan stared. "Who's this?" he asked. Malcolm shrugged. "I saw it on TV. A man. People said he made the airline say sorry to everyone." Donovan blinked slowly. "You drew this?" Malcolm nodded. "My mom used to tell me that I mattered." Even when I got picked last. Even when I was quiet. She said someone would see me one day. Like really see me. Donovan folded the picture gently and handed it back. They already do, he said. The rest of the flight was quiet. Malcolm leaned against Donovan's arm and fell asleep midway through the journey. His small hand clutched Donovan's jacket. Unconsciously, Donovan didn't move. As they began to descend, Malcolm stirred. I don't like landings, he mumbled. Close your eyes, Donovan said. Count backward from 20. Imagine you're holding someone's hand. Malcolm did, and the wheels touched down. At the gate, a woman waited, nervous, clutching a sign. Her face softened the moment she saw Malcolm emerge from the jet bridge. Auntie, he called out. She hugged him hard, eyes closed. Then she turned to Donovan. Were you sitting next to him? He nodded. Thank you. He talks about his mom more when someone listens. Donovan smiled. I think he's got a strong heart. Like someone raised him well. As they walked away, Malcolm turned back. Mr. Donovan? Donovan raised an eyebrow. I knew it was you, Malcolm said. From the drawing. Then he was gone. Back in his car. Donovan sat for a long moment before driving. The world felt loud again. But inside, something had shifted, as if the universe whispered, keep going. That night, he framed the words Malcolm had drawn. You matter. Always. He placed them beside a childhood photo of himself at age 8, alone in a schoolyard, silent, overlooked, waiting to be seen. Legacy was not just a company, not just a speech. Sometimes it was a seat beside a child. Sometimes it was silence filled with presence. And in that moment, Donovan Ellis knew he would never let the world return to normal, not while he still had breath. The captain's voice came over the intercom just as passengers began to settle into the rhythm of flight. It wasn't the usual routine announcement. There was a certain weight behind his words, measured and purposeful, as if he had been holding on to something that couldn't wait any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this is Captain Emerson speaking. I need to take a moment, if you'll allow me, to address something beyond flight paths and turbulence, something human. Donovan looked up from his seat in 2A. He wasn't the only one. Heads turned, brows furrowed. Flight attendants paused mid-service. Even the child across the aisle stopped coloring. I was made aware earlier today that one of our passengers has experienced a recent, highly publicized moment of injustice. You all know what I mean. Even if you weren't watching the news, Donovan's heart sank a little. He hadn't asked for this. He had come here to disappear. I want to say something, not just as your captain, but as someone who wears this uniform and this badge of responsibility. The cabin fell completely silent. I grew up in a small town in Georgia, the kind of place where everyone looks the same, thinks the same, acts the same. I didn't question things for a long time. I joined the Air Force, served overseas, saw the world from above, but I didn't start seeing people not truly until I started flying commercial. He paused. His voice wavered for just a breath. I once watched a gate agent delay boarding for a black family of 6, while allowing 5 solo white passengers to breeze through. I did nothing. Another time, I heard a flight attendant complain about loud passengers from the Bronx, not realizing those passengers were doctors returning from a medical mission. Again, I said nothing. Donovan closed his eyes. But silence has weight. It accumulates. And for every moment I stayed quiet, someone else had to carry what I should have helped hold. He let that linger. So today, I'm saying it clearly, Mr. Donovan Ellis is on this flight. And this airline, and I as its employee, failed him. Not just last month, not just in that headline, but for years, in the thousand invisible ways that make some people feel less seen, less safe, less human. Gase rose in the cabin. A few passengers glanced toward Donovan, some with curiosity, some with shame. "I apologize," the captain continued. "As a voice of this aircraft, and as a person who's learning, may we all do better, starting now." The intercom clicked off. Silence. And then, surprisingly, light applause broke out from the back of the plane. It traveled forward, uncertain at first, then steady, not performative, just human. Donovan didn't clap. He breathed. He turned to the window, eyes stinging. For once, not from rage, from release. When the flight attendant passed his row, she leaned in. "I've been flying 15 years, she whispered. "I've never heard a captain say anything like that." Donovan met her gaze. Maybe now they will. A few rose up. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair stood and walked over. He wore a suit, but not the kind tailored for wealth. Government issue. Perhaps. Diplomatic badge pinned to his coat. "Mr. Ellis," he said, "I just want to shake your hand. You don't know me, but my daughter is in law school because she watched your hearing last year. Said she'd never seen someone so calm under fire." Donovan stood and accepted the handshake. "I hope she gets to be 10 times louder than I ever was," he replied. The man smiled. "She already is." Later in the flight, another passenger, a woman in her 50s with silver braids, slipped Donovan a note. No name, just a sentence. "I was removed from a flight last winter for asking to change seats. I cried in the airport bathroom. Your silence spoke what I could not." Donovan folded the note and placed it inside his journal. By the time the plane began its descent, he had spoken to 4 passengers and received 3 more silent glances that said everything. It was not validation he wanted. It was confirmation that truth echoed farther than the moment of its telling. At baggage claim, the captain waited. He approached Donovan with a solemn nod. "I wasn't sure how that would land," he admitted. Donovan nodded. "Words like that don't land. They take root." Captain Emerson looked relieved. "My daughter's 16. He added, "Biracial. Some days she comes home tired without saying why. I want to be the kind of man she doesn't need to explain it to." Donovan offered a soft smile. "You just took the first step." As the captain walked away, Donovan stood alone amid a sea of moving suitcases and chatter. But inside, something was still. For years, he had believed change came through policy, platforms, strategy. But sometimes, it came through a simple voice overhead, choosing to speak when silence had always been safer. The cabin lights had dimmed as the aircraft sliced quietly through the night sky. Tray tables were up. Conversations had softened to murmurs, and most passengers had drifted into the timeless hush of cruising altitude. That was when she appeared. She couldn't have been more than 23, maybe 24. A blue hoodie pulled low over her eyes, hands trembling slightly as she walked past the rows, holding something tight between her palms. An envelope. Just paper. But it looked like it weighed 100 pounds. Donovan noticed her before she reached his row. She didn't make eye contact. Instead, she lingered beside his seat, uncertain. "Mr. Ellis," she said finally, voice barely audible. He looked up. "Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you. I just—" She hesitated, her breath catching. "I wrote you something. I didn't think I'd actually get to hand it to you, but—" She held the envelope forward. Donovan gently took it. She didn't wait for him to read it, just offered a nervous smile, whispered, Thank you for everything," and returned to her seat 4 rows back. He stared at the envelope for a long moment. It was plain white. No name on the outside, no markings, just that quiet weight. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, handwritten in blue ink. The pen strokes light in some places, heavy in others, like the writer had stopped and started many times. It began without a greeting. "I don't know where to begin. I watched what happened to you on the news, just like everyone else. But I saw something more than the story they tried to make you into. I saw my father." Donovan blinked. He died 3 years ago. Was a warehouse supervisor. Wore the same boots every day. Didn't talk much. But when he did, it always meant something. He once got accused of stealing supplies and lost his job without a chance to defend himself. He came home that night, sat on the porch, and said, "Sometimes they don't need proof. Just permission. I didn't understand it then. I do now. You looked like him that day at the gate. Calm. Still. Not silent. But something else. Dignified. That's the word my mom used. She cried watching you." Donovan swallowed hard. "I'm in graduate school now, studying history, trying to understand how the past keeps echoing, even when people pretend it stopped talking. Your name came up in my thesis defense. One of my professors said, 'There's a difference between being the story and owning the story.' I think you do both." He leaned back, absorbing the words slowly. "I've never written someone like this before. I just wanted you to know that I exist, that someone out there noticed, that your story moved beyond headlines and social clips and became part of someone's direction. I guess that's all legacy is. P.S. If I ever teach, I hope I do so with even half the quiet strength you carried that day." It wasn't signed. Donovan folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. His throat was tight. He closed his eyes and rested his head against the seat. Outside the window, clouds drifted beneath them like silver rivers. The world below, small and silent. He didn't move for several minutes. Then he reached into his briefcase, pulled out a small notebook, and began to write. Not notes, not strategy, just thoughts. You never know who is watching. You never know what fragments of your stillness become someone's reason to speak. You never know when your story stops being about you. The seat beside him was empty. The airline had offered to upgrade a passenger to sit next to him earlier. He had declined. Now, strangely, he felt someone was sitting there anyway, not in body, but in presence. He turned slightly, peering down the aisle at the young woman. She was reading now, earbuds in, head resting against the window. He didn't approach her, didn't need to. Some gestures were enough. Later. As the flight descended, she passed him again, this time with less hesitation. As she reached his row, he held up the envelope briefly, tapped it gently. She nodded, eyes shining. That was all. As the plane landed and passengers shuffled into the terminal, Donovan waited until the crowd had thinned. He moved slowly, deliberately. No rush. No need. At the gate, a little boy waved at him excitedly. "You're the man from the plane," he shouted. "The one the captain talked about." Donovan smiled softly. "Yes, that was me." The boy's father gave a respectful nod. "He asked if he could be like you when he grows up." "Tell him," Donovan replied gently. "He already is." He walked into the terminal, letter tucked safely inside his journal. Not for display, not for press, for memory, for grounding. Because sometimes what heals you doesn't come through revenge or redemption. Sometimes it comes in 1,200 words written on cheap paper by a stranger who sees you in their own story. He walked through the terminal with the weight of everything unspoken, not as a man who had won, but as one who had endured. Cameras did not follow him. Reporters did not shout his name. There were no press conferences, no podiums, no flashes, just the sound of slow footsteps on tile and the whisper of a terminal waking up with the dawn. But behind him, the world was already changing. The letter he had received mid-flight had not been the first. There had been emails, voicemails, silent nods from strangers, not loud applause, but something deeper. Respect that asked for no performance. Gratitude that needed no broadcast. A few days later, the board of Regalis Airways stepped down, not with scandal, with acknowledgement. In an open letter addressed to their passengers, they admitted fault, admitted silence, admitted that for too long. Professionalism had been weaponized to avoid responsibility. We built a culture of comfort for the privileged, the letter read, and called it safety. We apologize. And more importantly, we step aside to make room for those who will not merely promise better, but become better. Donovan read that letter in his study, seated beside the window that faced the city skyline. He did not smile, not out of bitterness, but because he knew the work had only begun. His phone buzzed quietly. It was Maria Jennings, the journalist, who had first covered the incident. "You did not give them revenge," she said over the phone. "You gave them a mirror," Donovan replied calmly. "People only change when they see themselves clearly." Maria hesitated, then added, "They want you to speak at the Concord Leadership Summit next month." He exhaled slowly. "Why?" "Because you kept your seat, and because they gave you none." There was a pause. Then Donovan said, "I'll think about it." But he already knew the answer. The story did not end in the terminal, nor in courtrooms, nor on news channels. It unfolded in coffee shops, in classrooms, in board meetings. People retold what happened, not just the injustice, but the response. In Chicago, a group of black pilots formed a coalition advocating for racial equity in hiring practices across the airline industry. In Atlanta, a group of college students created a podcast dissecting power dynamics through real-time stories like Donovan's. In Oakland, a 12-year-old named Reggie wrote an essay titled, "I Want to Sit Like Mr. Ellis." Donovan read that one too. Weeks later, he returned to the sky, not for protest, not for business, just to visit his mother's grave in Baton Rouge. It was a quiet flight. This time, the gate attendant greeted him with warmth. The pilot shook his hand. A young black boy sitting across the aisle smiled nervously and whispered to his mother, "That's him." Donovan looked out the window as they took off. Clouds formed soft mountains below. He rested his palm against the cold glass and breathed deeply. He remembered being a boy on his first flight with his father. How his father pointed to the sky and said, "See this? They think it belongs to them. But we're here too. Now. Finally." It felt like that sky was stretching open. As they reached cruising altitude, a flight attendant approached. "Mr. Ellis," she said, handing him a small envelope. "From the captain." Inside was a short note, handwritten. "Sir, thank you for showing us how to lead without needing the loudest voice in the room." He folded it slowly and placed it beside the letter from the young woman he'd met weeks before. Donovan closed his eyes and let the silence hold him. Not the silence of erasure, but the silence of peace earned. The work would continue. There were policies to revise, leaders to mentor, barriers to quietly disassemble. But in this moment, he simply let himself exist. No apologies, no armor, just a man in seat 2A, a man who had once been told to move, and chose instead to stay. Donovan Ellis never shouted. He never sued. He never retaliated. He simply stayed seated. And somehow, that silence thundered louder than any protest. It echoed in boardrooms, classrooms, and hearts across the country. Because it wasn't just about a seat, it was about worth, about being seen, about drawing the line when others pretend it isn't there. What happened on Flight 2287 is a reminder that injustice doesn't always slam doors. Sometimes it smiles, it speaks softly, it hides behind policy and pleasantry. And yet, the strength to stand firm, or in Donovan's case, to sit firm, is what sparks real change. Today, seats are being reassigned, systems are being rewritten, and dignity is no longer something you have to demand out loud to deserve. So if this story moved you, if you believe in respect that transcends appearance, if you stand against the quiet violence of discrimination, then share this story. Let it ripple. Let it sit in someone else's chest the way it sat in yours. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true stories that challenge what we think we know and invite us to become better. Because justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it boards quietly and refuses to move.